part of what we do. And thirdly, once you have a customer onboarded, how do you manage them profitably? And this is where the conversation with the CFO starts to click in, the relationship with numbers starts to click in. What is the ROI on what you do? Are you managing your customer profitably? So broadly, these are the three things that we do as a company. And really working across industry, across automobile, banking, financial services, consumer goods, retailing. We do all these three things and work with a whole range of companies. We host almost 75 million customer records in our own data center, which are our clients' data, enable more than 10 million transactions with those records. So essentially running intelligent campaigns and driving more than 300 of those per week. And also driving out more than 5 million customer conversations through a range of digital media. So it's a bunch of things that we do, and we really call ourselves partners who work across the data value chain. So that's a quick introduction about my company, Hansas Equity. Before I started Hansas Equity, I was the CMO for HDFC Bank, and before that, the CMO for Shoppers Stop, and I started my career with Procter & Gamble. So the agenda for today, from your perspective, really is the following. First, I want to talk a little bit about this whole concept of the new marketing, how marketing has changed. Jesse mentioned the huge amounts of data that is coming in. So what kind of changes is that driving? Then I want to share with you a little bit of research that we at Sequity have done about customer experience and share some of those findings with you. Then I want to talk about how this new marketing is in fact changing the nature of marketing completely and how it's almost becoming a service. We'll then touch upon how to really make all of this happen. You need to bust silos within companies and really set your data free. And once you set your data free, how do you really embed analytics as a way of life inside the company? And to really do that, your analytics needs to tell a story. Your data actually has a soul. So your analytics has to tell a story. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, just some wrap up. So I presume questions would be after the session, but if someone does have a question, feel free to put it up here and I'll try and answer it as I go along as well. So getting started with how marketing is changing, just want to talk of a very simple concept here. Look at today's consumer. This may be overstatement a bit, but 3.5 years, Alicia, already an online shopper, maybe assisted by the mother or the father, still in Montessori school, and has iPad as a favorite gadget, so much so that she really doesn't know how to move the pages of a book, but finds it easier to deal with the iPad. Very different world, very many new consumers. And India today has almost 450 million internet users and almost 440 million millennials in our population. And more than 390 million Generation Z customers, people who are customers born after 2000. So for this segment of consumers who really have grown up with digital devices, who are born in a completely different world and have slowly started picking up smartphones, their expectations from companies is very, very different. How I reacted to customer service issues or react to customer service issues, or how I engage with companies is very different from how my daughter or her friends engage. Also, the expectations start to change right from the get-go. So younger consumers want companies to be far easier to access. Also, most of the consumers who are now very familiar with digital media really have a social megaphone. And so the days when companies could put that product out and hope like hell that bad news was hidden really are over, and consumers today have a social megaphone and all of that that's publicized. So that's the world that we as marketers are dealing with. And remember, most CMOs, except for a lot of the e-commerce companies today, most CMOs of legacy companies aren't of this millennial generation. And so they need to make efforts to understand this whole story and what are these changes that are happening and how are they impacting the marketing today. The one thing which I strongly believe in, and that's nicely encapsulated by the CMO of Kimberly-Clark, that digital is really now a way of life. No longer can you really think about digital marketing because you're really living in a digital world. And so most companies need to change their operating models to become digital and not just change their marketing. In earlier days, when I was the head of marketing for Shoppers Stop, I would talk about the fact that a great loyalty program like the First Citizen may not be good enough to actually overcome bad product or bad stores. So similarly, great digital marketing cannot overcome the problem that a millennial may have of finding your company difficult to access or difficult to deal with. So really today the world is about digital, and so the focus has to shift from doing digital marketing to really talking about being or doing digital and creating an operating model for digital, which is much more about customer obsession, right? So what are the facets of this new marketing? The first piece, really an important trend in this new form of marketing, is relevance. None of us today are very comfortable when companies have data about us and yet are not able to position their products or services in a relevant way. The future really, to my mind, is more and more about changing marketing so dramatically that marketing is done so well that it almost feels like a service. And let me make this come alive to you. A few days back, I was selling my car, and I had earlier taken a auto loan, a car loan from my bank. And when you want to sell your car, you need to show that you have finished that loan, and so you need a no objection certificate from the bank. I was a premier customer of the bank, and yet for me, it took almost a couple of days to try and get that no objection certificate, because from the bank's perspective, having sold me a loan, they didn't see that relationship continuum going on as a priority, as a privileged customer, to reduce my pain and actually pre-sending me that NOC. So many such examples, and I'm sure all of you will resonate with these examples. Consumers today want to be marketed in a way by which it's relevant, and the more relevant you as a marketer are, the more it feels like a service and it's not intrusive. The second really is about this whole space of relationship marketing. Really, if you really look at this candidly, who really wants to have a relationship with a brand? Not really, nobody. But if there is relevance and there is value in it for me, as a customer, I would respond to something which is relevant and adds value to my life. If Amazon Prime allows me to get a book delivered or any other item delivered the same day or within a day because I'm a member of Amazon Prime, it's adding value to my life. And that becomes a profitable conversation I would like to have. And therefore, for me, that relationship is worth my while. So for marketers to understand how to build this value and how to create this relationship is important. Most marketers, remember I mentioned earlier, in legacy companies, are not of the same generation. And so sometimes we, me included, struggle to think about these concepts and struggle to say, how can you embed them in our marketing? The third important trend in this new marketing really is about mass customization. So you can customize today to a segment of one. And the days when you could move, you were okay as a marketer having 3 to 5 segments has really changed. And today you are being marketed through as a segment of one by a lot of digital businesses in the e-commerce space and other digital businesses. And as a consumer, you no longer are willing to accept that from one industry and not accept that from another. So if when I shop on Amazon, I get very personalized recommendations, when I go into net banking on my HDFC Bank or on my ICICI Bank net banking screen, I want the same level of customization to happen. The technology is there today, huge advances in technology. AI is helping all the way, and this can be done. And we'll talk about what are some of the barriers that stop some of these things from happening. But broadly, these are the 3 trends which I define as the new marketing: relevancy, relationship, and mass customization. So moving on, and I touched upon this a little bit earlier, benchmarks are no longer from your industry. So if I am a bank consumer or a retail consumer, I no longer benchmark only within the competitors of that industry. The tech players have created a service benchmark, a customer experience benchmark, a product assortment benchmark, which is so superior that we as consumers have begun to demand that of all industries. And that is a significant shift again. And what that means is companies cannot wait till someone in their industry disrupts them, because consumer thinking has already got disrupted. And that is the reason why marketers today need to be thinking about customer obsession and not only being customer centric. Companies like Uber, Ola, Amazon, Apple, Google are all examples of customer obsessed companies. And it's interesting when you talk of customer obsession, these are nice, fluffy words. And having been in boardrooms before as a CMO and in the last decade at Sequity in client boardrooms and with client CXOs, I can say that there are ways to take these concepts from pure fluff to hard-hitting, business impact delivering real marketing concepts. And I think that's the journey that the new marketing is going to really talk about. So just to switch a little bit, really today you're talking about the age of the customer, and Forrester has spoken about this, that 1950s were really the age of the brand. Unilever would talk about building these large brands, which were really creating a whole range of brand extensions under them. And you as a marketer were really driving mass communication to consumers. And then from the late 90s came the age of channels, when the channel became very important and retailers started to control a lot of the equation between consumer brands and consumers. And today, it's really the age of customer, when the low-cost mass customization possibilities are creating an opportunity for consumers to really have the bargaining power over marketeers. And what that means is consumer companies and both B2B and B2C companies are beginning to understand that if the consumer or the customer is in the driving seat, how do you remodel your operating models to be able to really create a model which delivers value to this consumer? So in this age of customer obsession, there are a few trends that I see, and I spot them across the work we do at Sequity across multiple companies and industries. One, I see that customers are global, and just because you are in India, you have a millennial who is really reacting like a global consumer. Second, like I said earlier, consumers have a megaphone today, so they're powerful. A bad experience with a bank can get transmitted through Twitter rapidly. Sometimes I hear from clients, therefore, the caution that they go to channels like Twitter with care, and that's all right. But consumers are definitely getting more powerful. Social media has definitely tipped the balance of power in their favor. And so consumers are now exercising more power over our brands than actually we do. And then consumers are always on. So I could be watching a movie on Amazon late at night and feel the need for a pizza and want to order, and I would do all of that from my smartphone. So consumers are always on. And while you might be a 9-to-5 operation, your consumer is reacting, operating, and dealing with your company on a regular basis. This is important because just to share a small anecdote, in my retailing days, when I was in Shopper Stop in late 90s, those were the early days of retail. And I remember, given the closeness to the customer that we had in that business, especially on Diwali and on other festival days, everyone in the top management would be in the stores and would be manning different counters, the cash counter being an associate at the front end, and dealing with consumers, whatever time that might be. And those businesses like retail, therefore, gave me at least a very close understanding of what it means to try and be always on. I think today, businesses are always on, and therefore more and more marketers need to really understand what that means from the way they structure their marketing campaigns, their marketing initiatives, and remodel them for this new age. Also, in the past, consumerism was really about what people owned And today it's as much about what they share. So while you as a consumer uh, may want to share some nice fashionable apparel that you bought from a brand, uh, if that's something which gets viral, that adds so much more value to the marketing program for that particular apparel brand, more than anything else that you might do through paid media. So today it's a lot about what consumers share. And yet you find, all of us find that as consumers, we still don't see that many companies who are customer obsessed. They seem to be still comfort with old ways of doing things. And my experience of working within companies for many years tells me that there may be need for internal evangelists when you're seeing a transition like this. And many of you who are listening to us today could be that evangelist who's sitting inside a company and influencing people to tell them more about what kind of an operating model change is required within their company. Or maybe companies are sometimes waiting for large external provocations. Online retail, for example, has been one such provocation for brick and mortar in India, though thankfully reason has prevailed, and the more than $1 billion that have been invested in discounts by the private equity companies and online retailers is changing, and therefore there is more sense of how marketing is getting done. But still, that was a very strong provocation that has led to a change. And finally, probably the readiness to change the current operating model is what companies hesitate to look at. And when you talk about changing an operating model, really you talk about moving from being a customer-aware company, really a company which talks about really being aware and being customer-centric, to being a customer-led company. And what are the difference really? A customer-led company, for example, would embrace a huge number of advanced techniques around data and analytics, as well as new research methods like ethnographic research to really get intimate with the customer. And this allows you to start thinking about your business and your buying touch points from customers, not as touch points, but as customer journeys. So in fact, there's some Forrester research which has showed that only 11% of marketers really bring together in one place all their structured and unstructured data to make more informed marketing decisions. And a customer-led company would tend to do that. So that is important. That movement from being customer-aware to customer-led is an important part of changing the operating model. Similarly, from being data-rich to being insight-driven. Companies are swimming in data, but research has shown that not more than 20 to 30% of the data is actually leveraged and is actually used. So a large migration has to happen from just being data rich to being insight driven. So rather than big data, you should be talking about big insight and big action. And thirdly, from looking for perfection to moving towards fast execution. And so test and learn, test and experiment is the new paradigm. In fact, a lot of companies who have really built out their operating models on analytics have used testing in very interesting ways. There's a company called Harrah's Casino. Their CEO, Gary Loveman, has this very interesting saying. He talks a lot about testing and how without constantly testing marketing initiatives and doing a test and control, you don't really gain customer knowledge, consumer knowledge, and you don't scale out analytics within the company. And he had an interesting saying. He said that there are 3 ways to get fired from this hotel and casino company called Harrah's. And that's theft, sexual harassment, and running an experiment without a control group. I thought that was interesting. And finally, from moving from siloed to connected enterprises. I mentioned earlier this whole thing of having silos within a company sometimes stop you from engaging digitally and also engaging in a way which is holistic for the customer. So companies need to be ready to make changes like this in their operating models. And we as marketers need to play the role of evangelizers within our own functions and within our own companies to talk about some of these changes that are needed of us. So moving on, I think clearly data equity in the days to come will rival brand equity. enough evidence about this. Data, in fact, doesn't get valued as much. And while even your office furniture goes into the balance sheet, your customer data may not appear on the balance sheet, and that needs to change. And I'm sure that will change. Maybe accounting standards need to factor that it change in, and then that change will happen faster. But today you have enormous data, and that data has data equity, which actually is going to be even more important than brand equity. So when you are a credit card consumer and you go and shop using that card in a jewelry store, you might experience that the bank calls you, and they call you to verify that you are actually you. How do you feel about that? When I get that call, I actually feel the trust about that bank goes up. And that's the data of that real-time transaction, which is creating brand equity. So this is important. And then again, there is so much more data today than before, and we touched upon that. You have all sorts of views of this consumer across what she does on a website, on search, across social networks. And all of that is just adding huge amount of value to your knowledge about the customer. And then that's really evidencing for marketers really what is the power of bringing a single view together about your consumer. And as you do that, there is also this opportunity today to start to append more data, to start making a half-filled profile, a more completely filled profile by adding information from other sources. In days to come, I'm sure data partnerships between companies where a DTH company may add value to an automobile company without necessarily sacrificing personally identified customer information, but adding extra valuable nuggets of information will start to happen as well. So these are important trends. And what this does is it allows you to really mass customize. We spoke of this earlier. So a company who has 1 million products, they're using push marketing to push out communication. Very different when you have a customer-centric approach, when you look for very specific matching products and develop dialogue in a feedback loop. So more and more, as I see the market change, things are moving, and as consumers, we don't want a monologue anymore. We want a dialogue. And that's leading to changes in the way companies engage with customers. And as these consumer expectations have changed, they've led to 4 important changes in the way consumers relate to companies. One, consumers want everything now. So they want to interact now, buy now, and their experience right now is what matters to them. Second, they want you as a marketer to deploy different kinds of information which together can add value. So if I have an Aadhaar card, then I want my bank to open an account for me within 3 minutes because Aadhaar identity can do eKYC for the bank. So that's extra value for me as a consumer. I want new things, new products, new services designed for me, so targeted precisely with a personalized experience. And finally, and this is more so for even the millennials, I want things to be simple. I want interactions to be easy. So all of these changes are dramatic, and while they are seeping in slowly in some businesses, and some other new age digital businesses have seen them from the word go, these are creating huge discontinuities in the way marketing is run. I'll move forward a little fast now. Recently, we did a customer experience study amongst the first studies in India, which focuses on the customer journey. And as a part of that, we spoke to more than 2,200 respondents across 9 industries and 8 cities, and looked at 4 key questions. One, when I, as a consumer, interact with a brand, was my purpose achieved? Was I successful in achieving the purpose of my interaction? 2, how easy was my interaction with the brand? 3rd, was I satisfied with the interaction? And 4th, was all the information that I required available to me to do that interaction? And interestingly, what we found was that almost 80% of people who surveyed were not happy with the customer experience they received. I'm sure as consumers, we would expect this. We are also a market which is transitioning. Many industries are facing intense competition only now. So this is really a point-in-time study. So it does show that consumers, their expectations are rising rapidly, and we as marketers need to meet those. And one of the things that I culled out of this report for you was the ease of interaction seems to be the largest problem that customers face. Almost 80% of consumers were unhappy with the ease of interacting with companies. So maybe the website was clunky, maybe the user interface was not good enough, maybe I had to run multiple hoops before I got what I wanted to buy. So this was something which consumers were unhappy about. So really, we saw that a lot of room for customer experience improvements. We saw that customers set their expectations not on their own category of industry, but across multiple categories. There seems to be a more global benchmark they seem to have. And that leads me to some thoughts around how that is changing marketing. And the concept that I touched upon earlier, really with so much data being available, what we believe at Sequity is, and what I believe very strongly is this whole concept of to services to sell, where as you start to make my data as a consumer available at the point at which I engage with the customer, just like that bank called me with that high value transaction in the jewelry store, I begin to start servicing customers at the point of consumption. And that's really when marketing starts to transform and starts to become more like a service. And yet, with this large amount of data that exists in most companies today, research shows there's still a very large gap. And while there's a large amount of customer data, there's a very large execution gap where only 20% of enterprises will actually use more than 50% of the total data that they collect. And therefore, the strategy to deploy analytics and data-led marketing and digital transformation would get stymied or would have this barrier of execution. And therefore, it's important to understand how that can be reduced and what can be done around that. But coming back to marketing as a service, traditional marketing or traditional campaign management has always spoken about, I have an offer, and let me now go and find a group of people to talk about that offer. Really, mass marketing using technology, you might have invested in marketing technology, maybe a campaign management solution, but still I call that mass marketing. From that to this new paradigm where you have a person with a change in behavior that suggests a need. So as an example, if I bank with, let's say, ICICI Bank, and the bank starts to notice that my balance is building up, I could draw many conclusions from there, but one of the conclusions that the bank could draw is that I'm building up this balance to become ready to be able to take a home loan because that EMI will be high. Were the bank to draw that conclusion, then they would come to me with a suggested bunch of knowledge around home loans, and therefore the change in behavior that I have displayed to the bank converts to a home loan purchase, which is very relevant to me at that point in time. So having a person with a change in behavior which suggests a need, and then therefore positioning the right offer to fit that need, is a completely different paradigm. And what this does is it takes your services to sell to reality. Obviously, from the perspective of companies today, most of interaction with consumers happens real time, and therefore you as a consumer don't have the patience to be called much later, and therefore the event that the bank or the retailer spots, if I've gone to Amazon and I've not completed my purchase, that's the event, or that's the point when Amazon would like to bring me back and get me to buy a product. And so therefore the window of opportunity is short, and the information value deteriorates over time as you delay that action. And that's where technology plays a huge role. And at the same time, as marketers, I think what we are responsible for is to assess and to be aware that the technology that you need to make this kind of initiative happen also costs a lot, and therefore the ROI has to be kept in mind. But when services to sell exemplifies itself, when you start to move on the x-axis from a level of differentiation where at the acquisition you've acquired with some intelligence, a lot of marketers are focused over here, to the next stage when you get to know me better, and therefore you start positioning products and increase wallet share by getting to know me better, to finally making it relevant for me. Every single engagement with the company starts making life much more relevant for me, and really the maximum shareholder value really gets extracted at this stage. And the real opportunity to transform customer experience is to move from this point where you got to know me better as a person to making it very relevant for me. And that is the technology chasm which companies have to overcome. And through this journey, one very important point keep in mind is your CFO is looking for a lot of ROI from these investments that you will have to make. So you need to know that push marketing, intrusive marketing may get you a 1% response, while as you move towards more real-time marketing, you could have a 10x that success outcome. And therefore, calibrating these investments carefully and going to a point when you build that infrastructure for your company can lead to actually very high ROIs. And therefore, if you would like to think about this strategically, you might want to say that different companies differentiate differently. How would my company change its operating model in a way by which it focuses on customer experience and a concept I call breaking the silos as two areas to differentiate in. And if you do this along with technology investments and bringing in a new age marketing team, the value back in terms of shareholder value to your company can be large.
Okay, Ajay, I'm going to give you a quick time
Yes.
check. I know
Yes,
you have
thank you.
lots of awesome slides, but we do need to, and I like the
Yes,
slides
yes,
at the
please.
end, so you need to kind of get there.
Yeah, how much time do I have, Jesse?
I think you're almost out of time, so maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, so quick one, right? Okay, so quick one. Don't let your data be trapped in the silos. What's important is that there's a huge amount of insight which consumers leave behind when they interact with us. Let that insight move into a single view, and the more you have a single view of your customers, the more you can create an institutional memory. And this institutional memory allows you to react at the point in time when customer value can be produced, and you can move from a monologue to a dialogue. And so I will just move towards the end of my presentation, and just to wrap up, I think there are a few key business ideas that I wanted to talk about. One was that it's critical for marketing teams to build a core competency in data-led marketing. Gartner had predicted by 2017 that the CMO will spend more on IT than the CIO. Apparently, that's happened. So you need to spend that wisely and build that competency. You need to let customer strategy drive your technology investments. You need to realize that analytics does not solve only a technical problem, but a social one. Remember, you tell stories with your data. Analytics team should be storytellers. Remember that you need to spot customer behavior changes as they happen, and then only marketing would move towards the service. And so then you can link your analytics to the last mile. Also importantly, if you want to break silos within your company, you need to create an internal customer management council of top-level CXOs. So customer-based issues are not only a marketeer's problem, but become a wider attention that gets put on them. So final slide, really, the following lessons that I've picked up over the last few decades of working with data across industries and companies and in different roles. One, transformation takes time. So phase your approach, lead with a vision. Second, make sure you keep getting results and have short-term wins. Third, technology is actually the easier part, but the change management can cost as much as 3 to 5 times that. So don't buy a Mercedes and then negotiate on the driver. Make sure you bring in change management. Involve strategic partners early, because learnings can allow you to accelerate this journey. And finally, show the ROI, but get a wider metric, which is return on customer. And for doing that, get the CFO on your side. So thank you, everyone. This is all that I had. Jesse, over to you.
Thanks so much, and I hope you're going to stay on because we do have some questions we should probably have to take after the next session. So in interest of time, I'm going to request the next session now. And Ashish also has a very interesting perspective. So as I mentioned, he's the co-founder and head of analytics for Muffa Analytics. But his background has also been in CRM and analytics in the financial services space, which is definitely a very data-rich environment. But as he starts the session, I also want to consciously say that there are questions coming saying that B2B does not have enough information. So, keep that also in mind, that the attendees are also looking for B2B specific insights. So over to you, Ashish.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can.
And
I can see
my
your
screen.
slide.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Ajay, for that first session. I think relevance, relationship, segment of one, you've hit the nail right and kind of set up the this next session for us. Guys, I represent Mafo Analytics, and we are a products company which works in the domain of artificial intelligence. And the whole idea is to focus on speed of insight, and that's where we work. Quickly, my background: I've been with GE, HSBC, and then Morpho Analytics was a startup that we started 5 years back. So let's get back to the session for today. There are two objectives that I would like to cover in the next 20, 25, 30 odd minutes. One is to look at multi-channel, and understand its context with respect to decision making. Right at the end of the day, whatever function or teams that you reach, it is all about decisions, and the whole multi-channel now has changed the game in terms of decision making. So that is something that we'll do quickly. And then what I thought, given that the talk is on analytics, I will take you through a couple of examples. These are real examples that we have done as an organization, and I'll show you how a focus on multi-channel helps dramatically improving customer experience on one hand, but at the same time, it also gives the return on investment and the return of customer that Ajay was talking about. So and as I take you through these examples, some of these are very B2B examples, so I hope it kind of answers some queries that people have. And the idea is that when you think of marketing, right, the first basic framework that anyone has is the customer life cycle, right? So the acquisition, the retention, the growth stages. I have picked up examples representing each one of them, and hopefully they'll be valuable as we go down this track. So let's get started. Here, what I wanted to start with was customer journey as a framework. I think everybody in marketing, no matter when you became part of industry or whether you are new to it, you've worked over here for a decade or so, customer journey is a very interesting framework and has existed in the marketing world. And to be frank, it is a very significant and important step because it helps marketers in identifying areas of strategic interventions. What strategies do you want to place around the journey that you kind of build up for your existing customers? Now, traditionally, this approach used to work very well, simply because one, there were not too many channels, so easier to navigate, easier to have a session internally and decide how this would work. At the same time, businesses also chose a core channel that they will operate in, and hence kept their focus on it. So if I was a mom and pop retail outlet, I was just that. I was not looking at anything else, and hence, if you were to build that customer journey framework, for me, it was fairly straightforward and easy. However, this is how I started looking at this when I thought, okay, if this is the customer journey, how does it look like in the present context? What we clearly see, even if I just keep two channels here as focus, there is a lot of diffusion which is happening all over the place. And there are a lot of factors which lead it, which are leading here in terms of why that is the case. But this is the truth which you can't ignore anymore. And now the complexity that it brings in is at the decision level, you still have to make your decisions around these stages of customer journey. And I just chose a very simple framework saying even if you just have an ACPP lined up, if you want to understand awareness, how do I improve awareness for my customers? How do I improve consideration or preference or purchase? You start seeing how these are complex now. They're not as straightforward as I will put my money on traditional ad and newspapers and that will do it for me, right? So that multi-channel in that sense is a complexity that one has to deal with now. At the same time though, what you also have to remember is the data streams that these interdependent, intertwined channels now generate are too fragmented. In this slide, I'm just showing you a very deconstructed customer journey, but you will start seeing that there is all kinds of data that it is generating at each level. So there is structured data, there is semi-structured data, and there is unstructured data. So on one hand, just taking a decision on awareness was a challenge simply because there are too many channels now. At the same time, it is difficult also because there is just too much data and at different levels that is available for me to work with. So, that becomes another challenge. Now, the way organizations have traditionally looked at addressing this, and Ajay kind of threw some light on that, is essentially creating teams at a departmental level, right? So we said, okay, social is a new channel which has come up. Let's create a social media war room, have some maverick teams created, and they are just looking at social data. We need to do research for testing, whether it's ad testing, for any kind of testing or new product launches. We'll have this research teams dedicated in doing that. And then, of course, there are these traditional heroes who kind of look at your transactional data and answer any queries that you might have. The question, though, is, does this really happen, right? Does this really help us? And if you look at it, the decision maker at the center today now deals with these different departments which are generating these insights. And he is now required to tie up these insights together and have the composite view that they was talking about. So what you really want is a view like this. What all marketing organizations need is an ability to get all of the data that you're sitting on, that is generated, that you can take from outside, together on a single platform for you to see under one single lens. That's the whole breaking the silos and making sure that data comes together, spiel that Ajay also brought to the table. And the way organizations are doing this, right, there are some interesting ways that they are doing that. So one, of course, is organizations are investing in data lakes, and so don't get lost with the definition. Data lake is nothing but it's just a repository which can handle, which stores all of your data in one place. The second sort of way to address this is by either developing or investing or buying a platform which can ingest different kinds of data. And a lot of solutions exist there. Examples would be, let's say, a IBM Bluemix, or a Google Bigtable, or an Amazon Web Service, for example, or Epoch in our case. So there are platform-based solutions which will help organizations get this data together. The third sort of approach that organizations are taking is investing in solutions which either will sit on top of this platform or have an interplay with these platforms which address specific use cases. For example, Intruid is an example, which is an NLP-based intervention which can sit on a platform and address your questions. Metaphor is a product that we've created. Is again a product which helps you generate insight using natural language, but can sit on any platform and handle any kind of data that organizations might have. Okay, so the takeaways so far are these, right? One, the channels are becoming diluted, right? So there is a lot of interplay that channels have. That is one. So appreciating that in itself, I think, is first step towards understanding how can I work towards an analytical intervention which improves customer experience. Second, all of these interactions are good zones of generating data. So as an organization, first I need to understand do I have systems enough to capture what I'm generating, or do I need to invest in systems which will help me in kind of taking care of this data that I'm generating at each interaction that I have with the customer. And then third, are there other external avenues, like let's say a Twitter pipe feed that I need from Twitter to understand how my customers are using Twitter for myself. So all of that needs to come together. Now, with this understanding, I want to punt into taking you through a couple of examples where we try to leverage these multiple channels and data that is coming through these multiple channels to address a core traditional analytical intervention that marketing does. Okay, so here is a typical prospect to target list funnel, right? All of us, again, if we go back to our marketing and something that says look up to us for, and the only science that we've brought in, traditionally, if you look at legacy businesses, is the scoring engine, as opposed to just being a rule engine, has now become a more statistical exercise because you have access to more data, right? And this is a very traditional way of looking at how do you reach out to an acquisition target that you have. The way we kind of twisted this funnel flow is we introduced two new elements in this engine. So as you score the leads, traditionally your high score leads are pushed to sales teams to pursue, and your poor leads are kind of kept aside. They're never looked at in most businesses. A lead nurturing engine is an approach where you're now using your platform to bring in your so-called cold leads or low score leads back into the system and see if there is an external active experience data input that I can bring in. And when I say, it's just a fancy word that I've used here, but you will have email campaigns that you're running. You will have blog postings that you do. Organizations will have these white papers that they release out, right? Customers or prospects will also be engaging onto your websites. All of that data is sort of a link towards how interested a possible prospect is for an organization. And if I'm able to use that data and bring them back in, there is an opportunity for me which does two things. One, it will improve who I'm reaching out to. At the same time, it will also give me an opportunity of defining a communication strategy that can be that can give the warmth to the cold call. Think about this. You downloaded a white paper from a website, and then you get a call from somebody who refers the white paper and wants to have a conversation around that. Now that is definitely a lead up from a pure cold call and has seen results. We've done this for a very difficult industry. We've done this for a vacation ownership company, and the results are tremendous. For them to see. So that just the takeaway here is leverage the data that the new channels provide you, and you can still go down the traditional path, but this external data now will help you improve the customer experience and at the same time help you improve the bottom line for the business. My second example that I wanted to take you guys through was a banking example, and great that Ajay sort of spoke about it. And right, you're absolutely right, Ajay, that banks are something that you typically want to forget about. You don't want to have any connection with the bank, except of course to see the salary being credited and payments being honored. That's the least that I expect from a bank. It's just the perception and association and the way they've dealt with customers historically that makes it. That makes a case for this view that I have for a bank. Now, what really happens is, to Ajay's example of, he was just looking to get a no objection certificate, and the bank took their own sweet time to get back to him because for them it was the end of relationship and they were not keen on pursuing it. Now, just juxtapose it by saying, if you as a bank have a mobile application, okay, which customers are using, how they're behaving, you get a lot of data around, their spend patterns. If you're connected with social media, if you have a buy-in stream on their credit card usage, there is a lot of information which can help you in real time reaching out to the customers when they need the help, right? So, for example, if today you want to have a loan application cleared from a traditional bank, it's going to take still going to take 7 to 10 days time frame, and that's being very positive about it. But that movement has become a nanosecond movement. A lot of players in the B2B space, for example, for lending to sellers on Flipkart, there are options available where the loan approval process itself has become a nanosecond process. So again, just using these external and multi-channel data has helped driving strategies which can make it more personalized, lead to enhanced customer experience, and when that happens, it is bound to generate more business value for a business. And the beauty of it is that we did this exercise for a microfinance institution, and you can imagine, you are talking about the bottom of the pyramid here, but at the same time, as you go down to the trenches, you find there's a lot of competition here, and the digitization space is what is differentiating our client to what exists in the market today. So again, the idea is more real time, ensure that you have access to data, you create your insights based on that, and these insights happen at the moment and are a wow factor for the end consumer or the customer, as opposed to something that happens on batch mode. My final example, just keeping check on time as well, is to look at a metric which is kind of used and abused in the customer experience world. So all of us have heard of Net Promoter Score. We've done our VOC surveys. We have customer satisfaction indices that we look at. And what we have to remember, though, is it's a very static exercise. So even if you are online, you would get these surveys from the Amazon, the Flipkart of the world. The challenge is the surveys are dated. There's no intervention that happens at the point in time when the surveys are generated. And I think what we leave on the table here is a view on the sales which is happening on the other side. And think of what I'm explaining here. Think of it in the context of a B2B play. We did this for a dealer-based engagement, and you can imagine that in a B2B space, each relationship is very critical. You lose a customer, you lose $1 million deal. And what we did for these guys is we were able to connect the Net Promoter Score along with the actual sales which was happening in real time. So in a sense, there is a model which tells us that what are the drivers of experience that lead to sale behavior. Okay, and the implementation of this from a platform perspective is essentially sort of a dealer scorecard, and it is real time, and it has feeders from sales which are real time. And what really happens is the sales feeders are able to flag a dealer which is not performing or showing behaviors of disengagement. And once you see that, it can initiate a workflow or tell a sales guy that we need to retain this customer. So it's more proactive as opposed to getting a call from a customer saying we want to close this relationship. You're doing it beforehand. And when you do that, it becomes real time. One, you get to see the drivers of disengagement. You also get to see what are the low-hanging fruits that I can act on right away to engage this customer or client. And so it is preemptive. You get to know about it beforehand. Two, it also gives you the power of using an action. So it tells the sales agent what he should be doing to kind of retain this customer. And this is an engagement we did for, like I said, a cement company, a dealer engagement company. Again, a B2B example. But remember, it's the implementation would be a platform implementation which gives them a real-time view, and hence now they don't have to sit to review their dealers in a state every week. They look at all of their dealers across all states. They can do that any time of the day. It's as real time as that. So this kind of gives us the retention example, and I quickly wanted to kind of round this all up, saying, so what have we learned in this space of multi-channel and customer experience, right? The first thing that I do want to leave with everyone is that the channel interdiffusion is at its peak now. Okay, you can't deny that. And even today, when I deal with some of my customers, I keep hearing social is not important for us. And my question back to them is, when will it become important? You know, the thing is, you can't just negate this channel anymore. It is there. I mean, it is there in the face. And let's understand that, understand how the diffusion is happening for your traditional channels. And then build your strategies around that. That's very important and critical. Second is a takeaway that Ajay also sort of ventured on, which was we need to break the silos that exist today. So, you know, gone are the days of that ninja warriors in each department. You will call them and they'll have the numbers on their tips, right? And that metric was his power. I think you know, we no longer have the luxury of having a departmental review meeting every month where we look at these numbers and decide what needs to be done. These have to sit together, and these have to be more real time. They need one, you know, and that is only going to happen when we break these silos and look at a single view of the customer, or try to bring all of that data together. As we do that, very important is metric definitions, you know, and like Ajay said, the metric definitions have to evolve, you know, and that's only because now, if you are just looking at, for example, awareness, that can't just be the awareness numbers that you get when you do your primary research, right? Though that metric will have to be redefined, and so also is the case with the benchmarks that you will set for any metric that you define. And to Ajay's point, some of these benchmarks will lie outside of your industries as well. So be open to that. An example that I wanted to quote was, you know, if you are in the customer experience domain, you possibly have you know, a call center, you know, where customers can call in and, you know, have a conversation with an agent. Now, traditionally, when you look at call center performance, productivity was a metric. You know, you will look at average handling time, you will look at first resolution time, stuff like that. But now remember that there are multiple channels that a customer has to reach to you. He can use social, your handles to reach back to you directly. He can send an email to a customer service email ID or a specific person in that case. He could be running a live chat module on your website, which is, again, the idea is that the customer engages with him directly. And you know, so what's his time to response on email? What's our time to response on email is a metric, for example, right? Closure rates for chat, you know, chats or chatbots that you use is another metric. So, so if you were to look at productivity itself, and the same agent is now handling these multiple channels of interaction with customer, the metric definitions will change, you know, and that is something that is critical. And there is no one tool to solve it all. You have to, you know, kind of focus on that. Fourth, real time is not a myth. You know, please, let's all agree to that. I keep hearing still from clients that you know, we don't need real time. And here's an example that I want to share with you. We worked with one of an mid to high end retailer here in India itself. And in their case, you know, if a customer is not making a purchase, they will, you know, reach out to them and ask them to fill a form. And some of these forms will be where the customer is not happy with a certain experience. And for this organization, which really is dealing with consumers who are hyper-connected, who are on multiple channels, they have a 48-hour tag to get back to a consumer, you know, a customer. So if you on your paper and pen feedback said that I was not happy with my interactions with XYZ, and, you know, I was treated shortly or whatever, the customer still feels that in the next 48 hours, if they were to call back, she'll come back. And that's not going to happen. The moment she walks out of your store, she's gone, because there are the competition is there, right around the corner, in her hand, on her laptop, on her tab. So let's remember that. And finally, taking some more time, but just to bring it all together, I just want all of us to remember that at the end of the day, any analytics intervention that happens, it is another input, another enabler to decision making, right? And in this case, that's customer experience. We have to remember that customer, and now not just customer, but his social circle is the king. And so, slightly changed view. But what we have to create are systems which are faster. You don't no longer have a luxury of, we will do customer segmentation in the next 6 months, and then we'll deploy it, and then we'll look at it. That period is over. Let's get over that. You need to have systems where you quickly test and learn, you implement if it works for you. If it doesn't work, you go back to the board, learn again, and not wait for that. I think the data I want to say was, we typically used to have, here's the marketing learning that we had, which will help another marketing learning. That is transforming. It is becoming machine learning as opposed to marketing learning, and we need to be with that to give our customers better experiences and have the ability to influence that in a positive way. That pretty much covers it from my side, guys.
Hello. Hi. So thank you so much for staying on. I know we've run a little over time. But I do want to, address any questions if there are, if I can request the speakers. And one kind of discussion that we had when Ajay was speaking itself was, how does it apply to B2B, where, perhaps it's more narrow in terms of the number of people that you have to address, and the data is structured, but perhaps not the same as B2C. So either Ashish or Ajay, if you want to just take that.
Hey, sorry guys, couldn't hear you. Could you repeat that question, please?
Yeah, the question was, how does analytics for CX pertain to B2B?
Yeah,
so I got that. Sorry, go on, Ashish.
No, I was just saying that, see, although we do understand that B2B is a relationship-led industry, right? There's a heavy emphasis on relationship. What we are seeing is there are disruptions which is happening even in that value chain. So the return on investment, the look at the bottom line is becoming very critical. And as you do that, and as you break these processes down, there are analytical interventions which will help you achieve that. So, which could be around, let's say, cost optimization. These could be around looking at how do I improve my CSAT scores or customer satisfaction scores. These could be around pricing or dynamic pricing. There's a lot that can be done in the B2B space from an analytics perspective.
Great. I hope that answered the question. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I think we will wrap for today, and we'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. IST with fresh set of topics. So there is a question for Ashish. What kind of behavioral data was used for clustering?
So, clustering, there are three things that was used in that. One was the actual app behavior, which is, how customers are using the app, what sections they are using. So, for example, you will differentiate between a guy who spends a lot of time on investment section or reads, articles that you post on investment sections, as opposed to someone who's just looking at the savings account and how the account flow is happening. So that is one. Second is the customers had also given a, as part of this app, they have access to the SMSs that customers generate. So you actually get to see how the loan flow is happening. When are they using their loan and for what activity? Is it for regular purchase? It is for business spend? Is it for for their mobile recharge. So that's the second level of input that we had. And third, of course, was their actual behavior with the organization. Did they have previous loans? What is the demographic? How much loans did they have? Did they pay it off? Were there delays in paying it off? All of that information.
Great. I think we're over time, and it's been a great session. I at least really enjoyed it and the discussions on the chat. So thank you all, everyone, and hope to see you tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Thank you, guys. Bye.